بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. So we wanted to continue and I'll talk about purification. So inshallah this will be the first of a few videos that we will send out to supplement what we're doing in the weekly class bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And so we wanted to continue off from where we left off in our last class when we were talking about the obligations of wudu. And so we mentioned that we were only going over those things that are absolutely obligatory for the wudu. We weren't going over the preferred way of making wudu, we were just going over the way that would make your wudu valid. So there's a difference between validity and acceptance, and also validity and what is optimal. So validity, it just talks about what is the bare minimum such that a person's act of worship will be considered acceptable, meaning that they have not missed out on anything that will be an obligation. However, this does not indicate that it will be accepted, because that is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor does it indicate that this is the most optimal way of doing a particular action, because the optimal way of doing any action is that we try to follow the exact example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as best as we can. So today we're going to continue in our discussion of ablution by talking about the sunnahs of ablution. So now we're going to be mentioning what are those things that are optimal when we make wudu. So right now I'm looking at the bottom of page 18 for those who have the book, and we're going to be looking at 2.11. So he begins, rahimahullah ta'ala wa hifdhullah. The sunnahs of ablution, wudu, are: 1. To begin with the Bismillah. The words Bismillah ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Now this is something that actually in the Shafi'i school of law is considered to be a sunnah. However, in the Hanbali school of law is considered to be an obligation. So this is why many Shafi'i scholars and Shafi'i teachers, they will actually say that this is a sunnah that you should not miss. As much as you're able to, you should not miss on saying the Bismillah, because there's a difference of opinion such that one group of scholars considers this to actually be an obligation, that it's better that you always begin the wudu by saying the Bismillah. So there are 2 points in time where a person would say the Bismillah. The first one would be when they just start to begin by washing their hands. When they begin to wash their hands, and we're going to get to that aspect of the wudu, but this washing of the hands initially is a sunnah. And so at this point in time, a person would say Bismillah. The entirety of it would be Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And then also when they begin to wash the face, because as we talked about, the face, the washing of the face is the actual first integral, it's the first obligation. And so when you begin washing the face at the top, you would say the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now this is on the basis that one is making wudu in a place where there is not a toilet, meaning that there is not a toilet next to one when they're making wudu. However, if there is a toilet next to one when they're making wudu, then they would not say the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim out loud. However, they would just say it within their heart, so that when they begin washing their hands, they would say Bismillah in their heart, and when they begin washing their face, they would say the Bismillah in their heart. So if there's a toilet next to one while they begin making the wudu, then they would not say the Bismillah out loud, because to say the name of Allah in a place where there's a toilet is considered to be makruh. It's very disliked. The next one he mentions, to wash one's hands 3 times before dipping them into the water container. Now, he's mentioning this because in traditional societies, oftentimes people would make wudu by using a water container. They would have a vessel of water and they would make the wudu in that. And so the sunnah, if one was using a vessel, would be to wash your hands 3 times outside of the water container itself. And then you would use your hands with the specific intention of carrying the water to make your wudu by doing so. For most of us though, most of the time, if not all the time that we'll be making wudu, we'll be using a faucet or maybe even a shower or something of this nature. And so when we wash our hands, we can just wash our hands, with the faucet water or with the shower water. And the ideal way of washing the hands is that you wash both the right and the left at the same time. So if you were to pretend that there is some water coming down in front of me, then I would wash my right hand, then I'll wash my left hand, and then go in between my fingers to get the water in between, and that would be once. And so I'm going up to my wrist, so again, once, twice, and then 3 times. And again, as we mentioned before, we begin by saying Bismillah. The next one that he mentions, to rinse out the mouth and nose 3 times. One takes in a mouth from a handful of water and snuffs up some of the rest of the handful into the nostrils, swishing the water around the mouth and expelling the water of the mouth and the nose simultaneously. Then again, rinses the mouth and then the nostrils from a second handful of water, followed by rinsing the mouth and the nostril from a third handful of water. So what he's talking about is the rinsing of the mouth after the washing of the hands. Now, he mentions the ideal way that the ulama have preferred based upon the evidence that we have from the Messenger of Allah and also from the aspect of saving water. However, there are different ways that you could possibly do this. The way that's mentioned in the book is considered to be the best way according to the Shafi'i school. However, there are other ways that can be done, meaning that, for example, you could do it separately such that you rinse out the mouth just on its own 3 times, and then you rinse out the nose on its own 3 times. But the way that he's referring to is that you would take a handful of water, you would take some water, a handful of it, you would take some of it into your mouth, wish it around, and then what remains of the water, you will place into your nose, and then you will spit out the water and blow out the water from your nose, and you use your left hand to hold your nose to blow out the water. Now, when you're using the water to wash out your nose, you should not snuff up the water high into your nose, meaning that it should not reach your sinuses. This is just from the outward portion of the nose that we're washing. So you don't have to snuff up the water into your nostrils, but just the outward aspect of the nose. And also, if you wanted to as well, you can use the little finger of your left hand to clean out any aspects of the nose. It is also a sunnah, and it's not necessarily mentioned in your book right here, but we talked about it a little bit before when we talked about the 2-stick, is that it's actually also considered to be a sunnah to use the miswak, to use the 2-stick at this time as well. So that before you actually begin rinsing out the mouth, you can use the 2-stick in order to fulfill the sunnah of using the miswak as well. The next one, to cover the entire scalp area when wiping the head with wet hands. So what we're talking about here, when we talked about the wiping of the head in terms of the integrals, we said that as long as some portion of the head is wiped, then that is sufficient. However, in terms of what is optimal, what is the sunnah, is that you wipe the entire head. The way that you would do that, you would take wet hands, you would wet your hands, you would take your hands, start at the beginning of the hairline, wipe your head all the way back to the nape of the neck, and then you would come back up again. And according to the Shafi'i school of law, you would actually do this 3 times as well. You would do it 3 times with new water each time. To wipe the ears inside and out with new water 3 times, and then the ear canals with 1 little finger with more new water 3 times. So this is talking about the aspect of wiping the ears. There are actually multiple different sunnahs associated with wiping the ears. The main sunnah, the strongest sunnah according to the Shafi'i school, is the first one that is mentioned, where you would wipe your ears. You would take some water, and you would take your hands and you would wipe the inside of the ear as well as the outside of the ear with the thumb going up like this. So you would do this and come up and go out like this. And then what it's mentioning with the little fingers is that you would wet the little fingers of your hands and you would go into your ears like this. The sunnah of going into the ear canal with the little fingers of the hand is actually considered not to be as strong of a sunnah. It's still considered to be a sunnah in the Shafi'i school, but it's not considered to be as strong as a sunnah. However, the first one that I demonstrated, this is considered to be the strongest sunnah. And you would do that 3 times. But again, both of them can be done as well. To interlace the fingers when washing one's hands to ensure that water reaches between them, and saturate between the toes using the little finger of the left hand. One begins with the little toe of the right foot coming up through the toes from beneath and finishes with the little toe of the left foot. So what he's mentioning here is similar to what we were mentioning when we said about washing the hands in the beginning. The sunnah of washing the hands is that now he's talking about when you're actually doing the obligatory washing, when you're going to wash from the tip of the fingers going up to the elbow. In this case, you would wash the hands, allow for the water to flow over the entire limb, and then to interlace your fingers. You can do it just like this to make sure that the water gets in between. Now, the second portion that he's mentioning is when it comes to washing the feet. He's mentioning that the sunnah is that you take the little finger of your left hand and you go in between the toes. So when you're washing your right foot, you start at the little toe of your right foot and go up towards the big toe, taking your little finger and going in between your toes to get the water in between. And then when you switch to wash your left foot, you will still use the little finger of the left hand, except now you're going to start in between the big toe and the toe next to it and go down to the little toe. And that will fulfill the sunnah that he's talking about here in terms of interlacing the fingers and when you're washing the hands up to including the elbow, and also when you're washing the feet. Now, something to note is that the sunnah of going in between the toes with the little finger is considered to be a sunnah for those whose toes are not tightly together. However, if a person has toes where the toes are tightly together, such that water cannot flow in between them, then going in between them with the little finger becomes an obligation to ensure that water is able to get in between them. So if a person has toes that are not tightly together such that the water would be able to naturally flow in between them, then this is a sunnah. However, if it's a situation where a person's toes are tightly together such that water cannot flow between them, then this becomes an obligation. So that's something to keep in mind. The next one that he mentions, to saturate one's beard is thick by combing it from beneath with wet fingers. Now we talked about the aspect of the man who has a beard. So now we said that the only obligation for the man with a beard and when we talked about the beard, we're saying that which grows along the chin bone, is that water just flows over it. So that fulfills obligation, but he's mentioning here that the sunnah is actually that you take new water with your hand and you go through your beard underneath it like this to wet the beard from underneath. And so that is considered to be a sunnah for a man who has a thick beard. And remember, we described the thick beard as being a beard that you cannot see the skin underneath from a normal distance. To begin with the right when washing arms and legs, but not the hands, cheeks, and ears, which are wiped as with the ears, right and left simultaneously. So as we mentioned before, these things are going to be like when you're washing your hands, you're doing this at the same time. And when you're washing your ears, you're going to be wiping your ears, you're going to be doing this at the same time. But when you're washing your hands and your feet, then you're always going to start with the right, then the left. In Islam, generally speaking, for those things that are good, those things that are considered to be praiseworthy, you start with the right, then you go to the left. Those things that are considered to be less praiseworthy, you go with the left instead of the right. The next one that he mentions, to wash or wipe if called for, each part 3 times. The obligatory minimum is once, though the sunnah is to perform them each 3 times. So this is something that the Shafi'i school considers to be a sunnah for every action of the wudu. That every action of the wudu we would do 3 times. Other schools hold that, for example, the wiping of the head and the wiping of the ears should only be done once. However, in the Shafi'i school, it's held that everything should be done 3 times, and this is the dominant position in the Shafi'i school. Though, as it mentions, if a person were to only do it once, it would still be valid. To wash the parts of the body successively and without pausing between them. Though if one pauses between them, even for a long time, one's ablution is still valid without renewing the intention. So this is from the aspect of continuity And this is again a similar situation that we mentioned before, where the ulama, they suggest that a person does this every time they make wudu, because, for example, in the Maliki school of law, this is considered to be an obligation. In the Maliki school of law, they consider it to be an obligation that one have a continuity in their wudu, that there be no long breaks in between the washing or the wiping of any of the limbs. And so this is something that a person should be mindful for, that they should try their best to have a continuity when they make wudu. However, technically speaking, if a person were to have a long break in their wudu, this would actually not break the wudu, according to the Shafi'i school. But again, out of abundance of precaution, it's recommended that in every time that a person makes wudu, that they have a continuity. They don't have long breaks in between. طيب. Bismillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. So now we're going into a different topic. The topic that we're going to be looking at now is the wiping of footgear. Now the wiping of the footgear is considered to be a sunnah, and it's something that takes different rulings depending on whether or not a person is traveling or whether or not a person is a resident. Whether a person in Arabic is a musafir, a traveler, or a maqim, a resident. And so he says, wiping one's footgear, khuff, with wet hands, or any other means that wets them, which is a dispensation that can take the place of the fifth ablution integral of washing the feet, is permissible to a non-traveler for 24 hours and to a traveler for 72 hours. The beginning of the period being reckoned from the time of the first minor ritual impurity that occurs after having put them on while in a state of ablution. So, let's clarify some things here. One is the aspect of what is going to actually define something being a khuff. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. The next is the aspect of the condition of being able to wipe. The condition initially, after we make sure that the actual khuff that we're going to be wearing is permissible to wipe over, the next condition is that one actually have made a full wudu before putting on the khuff, the footgear. So before you put on what would be considered to be a footgear, you have to have a complete wudu, meaning that you have to have done the wudu with the whole, with all the integrals, including the washing of the feet. So you have to have wudu before you put on the khuff. And again, we're going to go over what are the conditions for something to be a khuff. So once that is fulfilled, then you can place them on. Now, if you're a resident, meaning that you're not traveling more than 50 miles from your home location, then if you're a resident, you have up to 24 hours that you can wear this khuff and wipe over them, and your time starts from the time that you break your wudu. Meaning that, again, you have to have wudu when you put the khuff on, and so once you put the khuff on, the time does not start then. The time does not start until whatever point in time you actually break your wudu. Once you break your wudu, that initial breaking of the wudu after having put the khuffs on with a full wudu, now at this point, your clock starts. So if you're a resident, you're not traveling, you have 24 hours. If you're a musafir, if you're traveling, then you have 72 hours. And this is, again, on the basis that you broke your wudu while you were actually a traveler. It would not be the case if, for example, you broke your wudu before traveling, and then afterwards you traveled. The wudu had to have broken while you were traveling. So he mentions the condition, provided that one have full ablution when one first puts them on. That's what we were just mentioning. You have to have made a complete wudu before you actually put them on. That they be free of filth, meaning that they don't have any najasa on them. And we talked about those things will be considered to be najasa. That they be durable enough to keep walking around upon for the duration of the above mentioned periods, as travelers do in attending to their needs when camping and departing. Meaning that they have to be strong enough such that you can walk around in a general sense without them tearing apart. In other books of fiqh, and according to the Shafi'i school, they mention that essentially if you're able to walk roughly 2 miles in them without them, ripping and shredding apart, then they will be sufficient. And so this does not include regular cotton socks and definitely not dress socks and things of that nature. These need to be, you know, thick socks. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they used to wear leather socks. Some of you may have seen some of the leather socks that Muslims sometimes wear. But this also includes certain socks that are kind of newer in our time and day. Like, for example, waterproof socks. And actually nowadays they have an entire company that calls themselves Wudu socks, where they make socks specifically for these purposes. They meet the requirements that are mentioned here, and they're a little bit more comfortable than wearing leather socks, and so a person could get them and they will be able to wipe over them. And that they cover the whole foot up to and including the ankle bones, provided none of the foot shows. One may not wipe foot gear if wearing just one of a pair, washing the other foot, nor if any of the foot shows through a hole in them, even if tiny, meaning that there cannot be any holes in it. The only exception to this is, for example, if you're wearing Khuffs, like for example leather Khuffs, and they have a zipper, then any little bits that may, you know, be seen, that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about an actual hole being in the sock. And the next one, that they prevent water if dripped on them drop by drop. 3 consecutive drops, or according to major authorities, prevent water poured on them from directly and promptly reaching the foot. Meaning that if you were to drop water on them, the water would not get to the foot. So this is why, you know, we mentioned the aspect of waterproof socks. For example, if you dropped water on cotton socks and definitely dress socks, the water will reach your foot, meaning more or less automatically. And so these are things you have to be mindful of if you're going to try to wipe over a particular sock. If water reaches the foot through the holes of a seam stitches, it does not affect the validity of wiping them. Though if water can directly reach the foot through any other place, it violates this condition. You know, so again, the aspect of seam stitches, you know, these type of things, this is not going to invalidate the ability to wipe over them. However, if there's a hole, or if it's just the sock is, you know, so thin that they would allow for water to reach the foot promptly, then this would not be sufficient. The foot gears Muslims generally use for this are ankle-high leather socks that zip up and are worn inside the shoes, though they may be made of anything that fulfills the conditions, including thick, heavy wool socks that prevent water from reaching the foot directly, i.e. by shedding the first few drops or the first dash of poured water, as heavy wool does. But not modern dress socks, since they do not meet conditions C and E above, and we talked about that. It is sunnah to wipe the foot gear on the top, bottom, and heel in lines, as if combing something with the fingers, without covering every part of them or wiping them more than once. One puts the left hand under the heel and the right hand on top of the foot at the toes, drawing the right hand back towards the shin, while drawing the left along the bottom of the foot in the opposite direction towards the toes. It is sufficient as wiping the foot gear to wipe any part of their upper surface with wet hands, or to wet them by any other means. From the top of the foot up to the level of the ankle bones, it is not sufficient to only wipe from the bottom, heel, side of the foot, or some of the foot gear's inner surface that faces the skin. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about if you're wearing the foot gear, the ideal way is if you were to pretend that my foot was between my hands, is that you would actually, you would actually take your hand like this, and you will wipe it like this. So the top part of the foot gear, you will wipe going towards your ankle, and the bottom you will wipe going away from your ankle. It's going towards your toes. That is the ideal way. The bare minimum way is that you wipe just a portion of the top. The validity of wiping the foot gear is nullified by, and I want to mention one more thing as well. One more thing that is not mentioned in your book is that the criterion, because we mentioned before that the clock starts at the time that you break your wudu. But say, for example, I'm in the midst of traveling and now I have to see, okay, do I count myself as being a traveler? Do I count myself as being maqim, a resident? So that is going to determine where you actually wipe the sock, meaning that when you make wudu and you wipe the sock, that is going to determine whether you're going to be considered a muqim or musafir, meaning you're going to be considered a resident or a traveler. If you wipe your sock and you're still considered to be a resident, meaning you haven't left your city limits, then you're going to take the ruling of a resident. If you wipe your socks and you're a traveler, then you're going to take the ruling as a traveler, meaning that you're going to be traveling approximately 50 miles and you've already left your city limits. So that's something I wanted to mention as well, because it's not necessarily mentioned in your book. So the validity of wiping the foot gear is nullified by taking them off. If you take them off, then your wudu is nullified in the sense that you would have to wash your feet in order to continue. Meaning that if you take them off and you still had wudu based upon you wiping over the khuff, then in order to maintain that wudu, you have to go and wipe your feet up to including the ankle. And so you can think of the khuff as kind of holding in your wudu, and holding in your wudu within your feet. And once you take them off, the wudu within your feet is lost. And so in order to maintain it, you have to wash your foot. So if you take them off and you don't wash your foot, then you do not count as having wudu. The permissible period for wiping them expiring, meaning that if you're a resident and 24 hours has passed, you're no longer able to wipe over them, you have to make a full wudu again. Or if you're a traveler, after 72 hours, then you have to make wudu again. Or the occurrence of a state of major ritual impurity, janaba. And we're going to talk about this, this aspect of major ritual impurity, but the reason why it breaks it is because now you can no longer make wudu to purify yourself, but now you have to make a full ghusl. So you cannot wipe over khuffs when you have to make ghusl. When some part of the foot shows because of taking them off, or through a hole, or at the end of their permissible period, one removes the foot gear to perform ablution, or if one has ablution at the time, to wash the feet before putting them on again and starting a new period of permissibility. That's what we were just talking about. You have to wipe the feet again before you put them on in order to maintain the permissible aspect of wiping the foot gear. If a state of major ritual impurity occurs during the permissible period for wiping foot gear, one must take them off for the purificatory bath. As we just mentioned, that the purificatory bath, you cannot use the foot gear in order to do that. You have to actually make a full wudu, a full ghusl in order to purify oneself. So inshallah, we're going to stop here for this video, and inshallah we're going to continue by posting more videos in order to fulfill the section on purification. And so inshallah we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep you all in good care, and please keep us all in your du'as. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam huwa asbana min ni'mal wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.